Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our session on AI's impact in marketing. Today, we're going to be exploring how AI is reshaping marketing from campaign execution to content creation to customer insights and personalization. I'm your host, Laura Bithell, Senior Commercial Content Editor at Raconteur, and I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of industry experts. With us today, we have Lauren Maynard, Global Chief Growth Officer at FutureBrand, Lisa Harkness, partner at McKinsey & Company, and David Pugh-Jones, CMO of Corpora.ai. So thank you all for taking the time to speak to me today. I'm looking forward to it. So how has your view, or I guess understanding of AI's impact to marketing changed over the last couple of years? Perhaps Lisa, I'll start with you.
So the last couple of years have been a huge sort of ground shift in AI and how marketing uses AI. And I always think of marketing as being the sort of bellwether and front lead officer of the company in using data and marketing to generate value with customers and to be at the front leading edge. So Gen AI has really changed the game. If you think of Gen AI as an enabler to have a two-way conversation with your customers and to have AI act on your behalf versus just generate insights. And so when we think about, what is the impact, it was interesting when we studied what is Gen AI's potential value, and we came up with this big number of $4.4 trillion. But much of it, 40% of it, is driven by marketing and sales. And why is that, right? It's because a lot of the use cases that we expect to have and that companies expect to have great impact come with interactions with the customer, whether it's from efficiency argument, but what I would be more interested in is growth, right? Being more personalized, creating offers that matter, driving value that works. So that's what, in my mind has been the big C shift. And it's just how on a tech curve can you get, when do you get impact? And so what does it take to drive that? And it's always hard. It always starts slow and then peaks. So I don't know if others have similar, feelings about this.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. Sorry, I just think we as marketeers are always going to be the guinea pigs when any new technology appears, and it's been around for a while. Even though it's been a couple of years. Realistically, the technology has been around for significantly longer. It's just it hasn't been in our hands, or certainly not in consumers' hands. And I suppose we're the ones that have to dive deeper and work out the true value of what technologies like AI can do. And then obviously we have to eloquently explain how that can be transposed into a business framework, because AI, like most technologies, moves from R&D labs to the boardroom pretty quickly. And our role is really to try and translate where the opportunity lies in utilizing it, whether it's for our customers, for our teams, or whoever it may be. So I don't think it's necessarily about if we use AI. I think it's about how intelligently we deploy it personally. I don't see it now as a trend, but predominantly as a transformational partner. Because look, this one we've talked about. I remember actually vividly being an ex-Microsoft. You're talking about every year for 10 years, next year would be the year of mobile. Now, this is definitely the year of AI, and every year afterwards will be that. AI will be this second brain that helps us to grow faster, to accelerate research, to flag risks, to help us insight, and scale with more information than we have ever had before. So brands are probably thriving and experimenting, but equally as nervous about what's yet to come, because the pace of change is just, it's incredible.
I think the biggest change that I've seen both within our industry and the way that people more broadly are using AI is probably that as we've moved from sort of straight generative AI to the use of agentic models and what it can actually enable for people, is that's much closer to the revenue line because it's powering actual solutions. And I think that's had a major change, which is not just driving efficiency and effectiveness within the business, which, to be clear, is an incredibly important thing, but it's a lot easier to frame those as viable solutions that I think make it easier for people to buy them, to consume them, to implement them within their business. And so I think that becomes really important for how we're able to talk about it with different clients. Yeah, I mean, I think suddenly people have the ability to actually make change within their own business and not just have it be something that is driven by the tech sides of their business. And so when you put that power in people's hands within the guardrails of an agent, there's a lot more that you can do to impact.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about it sort of being democratized and everyone being able to use this technology rather than just, you say, it kind of being something that resides within the tech teams. You all talked there about, marketers being the guinea pigs and kind of moving beyond experimentation to using AI as a valuable business tool. I wondered if kind of each of you could share maybe a practical example of how brands can use AI now as a strategic asset in their marketing efforts. Perhaps David, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, well, we're already seeing that with our research engine, and the interesting thing is sometimes it's assumed that there are industries or category sectors that will adopt it faster than others. What we're actually seeing is some of the ones that are you wouldn't necessarily see that as utilizing the technology are actually doing that. So, whether we're working with universities or we're working with scientific programs and initiatives, or we're actually working with global corporates and big tech companies, they're all still working out how to navigate and implement it. But also this goes back to the evolution of how much data is going into AI and how it's then being trained in the models. So it becomes this question topic around hallucinations. Okay, so how much can you trust of the information that's being put in and how much is being put out? And that's where businesses need to be cognizant, they need to be conscious, and they need to be certainly aware of the true value of what they're getting out of that. And equally is look, what they don't want is data breaches, is individuals using or revealing information that is private data that the company doesn't want the light of day to see. So there's this fine line between all of the different AI models that have got that access to that information and you closing it and guardrailing it, protecting what you have as a resource and that value you have, but dissecting it so you can understand more information. So that's where we're seeing those industries and sectors really try and get into the understanding of the unstructured data that they hold. And as you can imagine, and sometimes that is, it's petabytes worth of data. It's incredible.
The way that we think about the integration of AI into our business, which then is kind of replicable across a number of places in the creative industries. So think about it from ideation. This is relevant to most people, right? Which is, can you actually have closed large language models that are trained on, for example, the incredibly expensive panel data that you have, your customer data, all of the insights that are usually read by an individual or group of individuals, but not processed as a whole to inform the solution. So it gives you a stronger starting point because you're actually leveraging things you've already invested heavily in. The second is in generation. That's pretty straightforward in a creative business. I think obviously that continues to evolve, but the generation of creative ideas in ways that you couldn't before and much faster. The third is validation, and this is something that in the creative space was really never readily available. So how can we actually use customer data to then test the strategy that we build and the designs that we create in-house to rapidly evolve the work that we're doing without having to go externally to consumer testing or customer testing? You always have to do that still, but it allows you to feedback in a way that is concrete and slightly more objective than what is normally a very subjective process. And the last, and this is really important, though maybe not the most exciting, I think, for everybody, is that brand governance is really important, especially when you're working with incredibly large organizations that come to life in 100 different countries around the world. You need to be able to think about how you govern the brand. AI is not the solution. It is a tool that powers better brand governance solutions so that rather than individuals having oversight on how your brand is coming to life, AI can actually power the way to ensure that the guidelines you've built are done properly across the world and in ways that are relevant for each local market. And so that delivers an efficiency and effectiveness for businesses that they really couldn't have before. And your talent can then go spend time doing other things where they can add a lot more value. So that's kind of the framing of how we think about it.
So we're seeing, generative AI across a number of different clients, right? We're seeing a lot of experimentation and now moving into, scaling. And so first, I would say, if you take a step back, and I think both David and Lauren have said it, you have to start with a use case that drives value. Because there were a lot of experimentations where, we don't have the data for this, but let's try it. And we quickly figured out that if you don't have the data for it, you're not going to get a great answer. So agentic is helping us, sort of action some of the steps, but first you need to do the strategy, right? And then if I give an example of, a number of industries, but just one where we did personalization, right? We saw content creation much quicker, but it's all about the learning. The first version of the personalized email to, a specific segment was, "Hey, lovely lady," right? So that is not a great way to start. So there's a lot of learning that has to go on that just doesn't pop out of, a Gen AI program. And then, but that lift in the, in personalization, because most customers, 71%, tell us they want personalized offers. We saw the trifecta. We saw satisfaction go up, we saw costs go down, and we saw conversion go up, right? So there's tons of value that we're seeing. It just goes back to what Lauren and David said about, you need to train the model. You need to have the data set up in a way that you can actually access it in a unified customer, sort of in a unified customer way. And then third, you have to have guardrails, because you couldn't have sent out that email that said, "Hey, lovely lady." That's a very simple example of something that you would never want to happen, but we need the human insights. And I love that it's human plus AI in getting to the best answer. And I know a lot of people are worried about that, but we're seeing over and over again that the insights that we generate and the way our folks know the customers and clients can't be replicated by an LLM at this point.
Yeah, I just that's a great segue, actually, because with AI now, if this is in the hands of the people, okay, so this is no longer limited to theoretical use cases or pilot projects, okay. This is an enabler, right? This will level the playing field like we never knew before. I mean, prompt engineers is the new buzzword regarding job descriptions, and business agility and market responsiveness and innovation, all of these things that are all coming out of it. And then we say about what are marketeers doing? Well, I don't think this is just about marketeers. This is about the CEO, the CFO, everyone jumping in and saying, look, the potential and the shift in how this technology is evolving, whilst there's a trust scenario there, it's still going to drive mission critical functions across every discipline of every business. So you think customer insights, campaign optimization, oh my Lord, that will change significantly in the next 12 months without a doubt. Market intelligence, well, now we have the capability to share insight that we never even had access to, or we're unearthing information and data at a scale and speed that was previously unimaginable. So that strategic value lies in the technology's ability to turn the entirety of the world's data into some form of actionable intelligence. So, that's the indispensable piece, right? For us as brands, we know that this is a data-driven economy, right? But we still need to talk to the people, or we need to talk to brands in that empowering trust, values, equality. All of those things don't go away. It's just how does AI help us to do that?
No, the one thing that I just want to pile on, totally see that. But in order for that to happen, 50% of the effort has to be in the tech, or some small percent, and then 50% in the training and the reorganization of how things work, right? So you can't have this idea that you're going to buy this, super tech and it's going to be immediately trained, and everyone, David, in that environment is going to know how to use it in campaign management. There's a ton of change management that goes on that I think a lot of folks don't see. They think it's this magic elixir, and the work to connect up all the data and the work to connect up all the functions is going to be a huge driver of value. And so people that can get that right, Lauren, when you were saying, just the oversight and the guardrails in your number 4, it doesn't happen without the CEO and the other functions actually know what's going on and being in on the process.
That for me is such an important point that is often missed, which is to everything you were saying. last, Lisa, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really easy for people to forget that you have to be so intentional with the way that you structure your ingoing queries, with actually mapping out your end game and what you want to get out of it. And in the same way that in an investment bank or in a management consultancy, you would never take the analyst's first pass analysis and send it on to the client. I think that's actually quite missed because we have a trust in tech in this scenario that you don't have in other spaces. And there's a lot of danger with that. I find in, everything from research tools to well-built, well-trained models that we have going on, which is sometimes they don't bring us to the right place. And that for me is the biggest concern, which is how do we ensure that you always have that right kind of stage gate with outputs and to be able to have the human questioning on top of it. I don't know how everyone else is dealing with that.
Yeah.
It made me smile, actually. Is look, the utilization, like, everyone's testing and learning. They're still working out how best to do this. I know Sam Altman tweeted about how many millions of pounds or dollars it cost for everyone to say please and thank you. And then there was a high propensity of Americans that were actually saying please and thank you because they thought if AI ever did take over, they would be the last to be taken out. So, there is an education piece here about us ensuring that we put this in the hands of everyone that's capable of doing it. So it's certainly, the future doesn't belong to AI alone. Let's be very clear about that. But it does belong to some form of symphony of human endeavor and creativity and intelligence working in harmony. And we just need to make sure that whoever those mouthpieces are that are telling that story externally, ensure that this isn't stealing people's jobs, but is actually creating them.
Well, just on the data side, we've seen that 13% of companies now have an AI, risk officer, and we expect that number to keep, doubling and quadrupling. We see that the guardrails when we're setting up agentic use cases are super important to getting it right, and we can actually use agents to identify risk. So there are layers of how we, Lauren, don't have the kinds of, my associate comes in and says, look, I've discovered, nuclear fusion, and I send it out because that's not going to happen, right? I mean, I hope they would, but there's a check and balance there. At the same time, there's a fear that we can't do anything because we have to put so many guardrails on. And I think it's that balance between, what are realistic guardrails in some industries will be different than regulated industries, sure. But what is the balance between what guardrails we have and what we can actually go out and do, and where do we test? Can we use an agent to test? Can we use an agent to sort of get that information you were talking about, David, being always on? So instead of getting those emails that say do not reply, your item isn't coming tomorrow, and you're like, well, now who do I reach out to? There's someone on the other side who can say, well, where is it? When does it come? And that gets you more information from your customer in a way that we could never do before. So this pull and push of guardrails is super important, and we're experimenting with it all the time. But I promise.
I was just going to say, that is something actually we worked on, where if we're working with we've even had individuals or friends where we've utilized our own research technology, and we've unearthed medical research that has helped an individual take those learnings into the surgeon that was operating on them and actually help educate them. So finding unsolved scenarios or bringing research together. So unearthing, the schematics of a fighter plane from the 50s, or showcasing something that's happened from a practitioner's point of view. This is the joy and the beauty of what AI will be able to do, is people will blend their own insights and their own research with those of others to find and solve more things. And I hope off the back of that, we see more incredible stories that come off it.
This is great. I feel like you're answering so many of my questions as you go along. It's wonderful.
I've got a feeling we could be in for about 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah,
I know, I'm going to have to cut us off. But no, that is really interesting. I was thinking there, about I guess that kind of tension, as you say, between, sort of maintaining brand trust and consistency and kind of, making sure that if you are generating something, it's not going to kind of cause any damage to your brand, but it's also allowing you to be creative. So I guess within that it is, as you say, it's, you know, the guardrails have to be there, the right input has to be there, and you've always got to have a human in the loop. I wondered though, in terms of, you know, lots of people are using the same tools or similar tools, what is it that kind of, you know, becomes the real differentiator in a kind of AI-driven marketing world if everyone is using similar tools? Is it to do with the inputs? Is it to do with the people? I'd really like to know. Perhaps Lisa, I'll come to you first.
Great. So the differentiator, I think we talked about, is number one in the prompt engineering. Like what question you ask determines what answer you get. But also in the tech stack of what data you have connected. So if you're missing, you know, any piece of that stack, you only get, you know, 40% of the answer. So that's one. So it would be just the prompt engineering. Two would be the data stack. And three, I would go back to what I said before about the strategy. Like you really need to start on the things that matter most so that you have the benefit of people who've understand the problem, who understand the micro-segmentation of who's going to, you know, who you're talking to. And if you have those going on, I think you can get to the place where you can use this stuff and you don't have the problem of hallucination or we're not going to get value out of it. At the same time, when you step back and you say, you know, how do you get started on this? The prompt engineering is only as good as the data from which it pulls. So there are some people who need to go back and understand, you know, are we using a commercial engine? Well, if we use a commercial engine, there's only so much we can get out of it. How do we put our data into a sandbox and figure out how our insights that drive the importance of our business come to play? And that's not as overwhelming as it seems. There are lots of ways you can do that. But your question of if everyone's using the same answer, maybe everyone gets the same data, everyone gets the same answer. And that's not what's really happening because of how we ask the question. But putting our own insights in, this where the human in the loop matters, is the difference.
I think if you think about the use of AI as a tool, and I think that that's the piece that is so important to recognize, is it's just a tool. It's a tool to be able to do something. And from a useful analogy standpoint, is that if I sat next to a friend of mine who is an artist and we are using, you know, we are using tools to create a vision, her vision is better than mine because I'm not particularly great at that. And so that's the question of what are you putting into it and what is your end game in terms of the solution that you're trying to create, the picture that you have. It is so much about the use of the tools properly rather than it is what the tool itself is. And I think obviously, you know, if you were using a base from 18 months ago, you're not working off of a great one. So sure, that makes a difference, but you know, at the end of the day, it's really about the humans around it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say is you talked about you know, how do we differentiate? There's a number of factors here. One is clearly, obviously, those brands that are AI driven that have got huge investment, and let's just, you know, we don't even need to see the numbers that are being invested in this technology right now. They're eye-watering. And so clearly, obviously, share of voice and marketing dollars and spend is going to bring awareness and adoption for all manner of individuals across the globe. And then there's the cut through of all of those other products that are coming out there, and they are coming out, you know, literally as a marketeer. The challenge is to work out which ones actually do have some value to you. They're not resource intensive. You can learn them fast. Your teams are willing to adopt them so that you have the entirety of your business doing that. And clearly, on the knock-on effect of that is if you are just using Gen AI, then let's just assume 1,000 prompts, you receive 1,000 different responses. But if people then publish those 1,000 responses and they have elements of hallucinations in them, then that's retraining the models and retraining the data. So then what is true and what isn't? And as a publisher, I would say veracity and verification are the fundamentals. So we need to know where the sources of the information are coming from so that we can make sure we can trust it.
Yeah, certainly can relate as a publisher. We've got to be very careful. I know earlier you kind of mentioned personalization and kind of what can be done there. And I know, Lisa, you said there was some, definitely some like testing and learning with that. I wondered kind of where's the sky the limit with this? What's the kind of opportunity and potential of personalization using AI? Perhaps David, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, the promise of personalization has always been a creative dream for us marketeers, right? But it's still a logistical nightmare. So AI does flip the scripts in some way because it can help us spot patterns, it can surface signals, it can help us tailor content. We can get information in real time. We're not waiting for it to be published. And but the relevance is still important, right? And fundamental. It's still how relevant it to your job, to your business, and to your customers. Look, we ingest something like 2 million documents a second in our technology, but equally is we need to understand how hyper-contextual it is, the demographics, the preferences, how marketers and researchers would use that technology and that insight. So scale without soul is just a load of old noise, right? It's just one of those things where we have to work in tandem with the technology and human nuance that effectively gives us that personalization, which then becomes performance. That's probably how I use it, and yet I do get blindsided a lot on all manners of technology. I'm probably like a cat following a watch that's shining, glimmering on the side of the wall every time something gets released.
Anyone else want to
Yeah,
jump
I
in?
can jump in. I think, as David said, it's sort of the holy grail, right? One-to-one, you're going to have the perfect offer for the right person at the right time in the right place. And we're getting there. We're closer than we've ever been to being able to do that. And how do we do it, right? We have to understand the right person and the right time and the right place and the right offer and all that. And doing that is almost it's almost too much for the human brain to take all that data and get there. So this gives us a tool, Lauren's words, to get there, right? But then we have to make decisions from that data as to what we do with it, right? And that decisioning right now is pretty important and a human job of, how do you think about the customer who you've had for 20 years, who you can offer something new to getting the new customer? That's been a consummate question in every brand. And you can start to pinpoint who's about to leave, who's not about to leave. Those are all, how much do you invest? How do you invest? How do you test those investments? That's all much more possible now in a time frame we could have only imagined. But at the end of that, we have to then measure it and know what worked and what didn't, and then feed it back into the model. So this isn't a black box where suddenly we have the data. We can understand that I'm a segment of one, and what I might need today, you can immediately offer me. But if it doesn't work, you have to understand why, right? And that has to flow back in. So this is what is exciting for everyone, because the promise is there, but with bad data, bad strategies, no tech stack, guardrails not set up, and customers who there's a risk if you do it wrong to lose them, you need a whole bunch of thinking around. And we're going to get there. We're on that journey.
I had a conversation with Mel. Sorry, Lauren. I was just going to say, before I forget, I had a conversation with Mel yesterday talking about how technology transforms the human brain. And he mentioned something like the calculator. When the calculator first came out, people forgot to start adding up in their brains. They just thought the calculator takes over, so I'm just going to get lazy about this. And I think there was an MIT Sloan study of the perils of I think it was the overuse of AI can diminish curiosity and critical thinking. And I thought that was fascinating is that we use AI as a crutch. So we start to believe that it can do everything, all manner of us, create our shopping lists and answer questions that we already know the answer. We're not willing to do that. So we kind of have to look at the flip side. If we're not careful, it becomes a bit of a curiosity killer. So we've got to interrogate the data as much as we integrate it into our society and our businesses. And there is a very, very fine line.
When I think about sort of quality management in this conversation, which is so important with that level of personalization, where I sit, what our business does is kind of more upstream, the creation of brand. And I think that, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even, you spent a lot of money in the creation of brand that is supposed to be representative of your business strategy, that is a reflection of your marketing strategy, how you want to come to life, your differentiation and your offer to clients. And in a world of increased personalization and with a kind of a shortened distance or a collapse of a sales funnel between the creation of brand, the creation of product, and when it gets into someone's hand, influencers playing a role, much lower control over your marketing mix or who is the voice within that marketing mix. It's really, really easy for your brand to just disintegrate in that space. And so the point that Lisa is making, in terms of being able to A/B test and understand what's impactful, is that you actually have a lot more control that what's going into that testing as you're personalizing is much closer to what your intention was at the creation of brand. And I think that's really powerful because you should have a much more direct line all the way from where your business strategy is into your brand strategy, into your marketing strategy, into the actual executions in market, because you have that control. You have the governance of what your intention was, and that really wasn't there before. So I think that's really powerful. And to your point, Lisa, you can always feed that data back in. That just wasn't there. So for me, it's exciting because it also holds true. It keeps the work that we're doing, really, we stay true to it in a way that we couldn't before.
Yeah, I feel like it sounds like it all comes back to that. Yeah, joined up strategy, prep, testing, and in a really exciting space. But as you say, David, I've also heard a lot of people saying, well, I'm not thinking as much as I used to using these tools. So there is definitely a balance to be struck. This is all really fascinating. I think we probably do need to kind of come to the final question, which is just to wrap up, I guess. If I could ask each of you kind of what's one thing leaders should maybe do now to get their marketing teams ready for this future, which is a broad question, but yeah, one thing. Lisa, perhaps I'll start with you.
So I think the one thing that folks should do is to learn about the change management that you need to do. I think there's once you understand what the lay of the land looks like and what it's going to take to go from today to the tomorrow we seek, it gets easier to layer in the change that you want versus an incremental approach.
Great. And David, would you agree?
Well, wholeheartedly. I mean, what I would say is if leaders weren't already contemplating how to adopt this technology and they weren't already questioning their leadership teams, I would be mightily concerned. That's my first point. But clearly, obviously, look, AI is not it's not a replacement, right? It's just a collaborative, creative partner for everyone that utilizes it. Businesses just need to navigate and be super smart about the ones that they do adopt, the ones that they integrate within their companies, and view AI as a sort of like an augmentation tool rather than just a substitute for whatever you do in whatever industry, and especially in our world, in the marketing industry, where look, empathy, human connection, and values, trust, and experience, fundamentally experiences, right, in taking people on a journey, they are wholeheartedly paramount. But we then have to translate that into our conversations with our leadership teams to make sure that they believe in our recommendations of what we should utilize.
Lauren?
Lisa, you stole mine, so I'm going to build on that because I'm living that change management, and I see it both within our own business, within IPG, within the marketing world, and within clients. Is that I think that what's really important is that as you navigate the change management around this, recognizing that you need to create freedom within a framework, and the framework has to come first. There is so much danger in the missteps and some of the outcomes that you can have from that as you onboard these tools and drive that change within your business. But if it is too process oriented, there is no business in bringing it in anyway, because Ted, what everybody has been talking about, you don't have the space for the creativity and the ideas that come in as a part of that. And that is an unusually fine line to walk with these types of tools. So really having an intention of what you want to do and what you get out of it so that you can give people the space to play and to play safely and to be more creative. And I mean creative in any way. I'm not just talking about within a creative industry, is really critical. So that would be my last statement.
Great. No, that feels like a really great note to end on, with some practical advice for marketing leaders around navigating change and I guess being really intentional in their strategy. Thank you so much for all joining me today.
Thank you.
So
It
thank
was
you
a
very much for
pleasure. It
having
was
me.
so nice to meet all of you.
Yeah.